Good afternoon, this is Jeff of Sewer Tech Northwest. Today we're at property address 9545 Southeast 76th Avenue here in Milwaukee. Located just to the left of the front doorway. I describe everything as if you're standing out in the street facing the front of the house. So I've got a 3-inch ABS cleanout right in the concrete. We're going to check the overall condition and serviceability of the sanitary sewer line. Water's currently running. You're zeroed out and off we go here. So I've actually already run my camera through the line. My last video file didn't save properly, so I'm redoing this thing here really quick. Aha! Got that little piece of debris out of there too. Anyway, we're going to get out here a little ways, and the line's going to swap over to 6-inch concrete. Now, they've taken the update of this line all the way, basically right to where the yard meets the gravel. Then it transitions here over to concrete, and it would appear to be 6-inch concrete as far as I can tell. The way we transition on this hard dive like this, it's feasible. It could be 4-inch pipe, but generally speaking, most everything in this part of town, as it relates to concrete from this era, is 6-inch diameter. And then we do this big old hard nose dive here right at the very end. Now, when I first tried to locate this thing on this steep dive right here, the locate came in on the far side of the road, which did not make sense. This is a very short sewer line. When I pulled the camera back to the top of the drop, which gives you a much nicer locate signal where the camera's sitting relatively flat, the main lateral, if you look down the street at the intersection, you can see where the manhole is. The main here is just barely into the roadway. Much of this line, a huge percentage of it, is just under grass, dirt, and gravel, which is a really nice thing when it comes time to do an update on a sewer line. Alright, we're going to go ahead and start pulling back in here. Line is fully drained. So what I was noticing on the way out on the last video here, if you notice on this vertical drop, you've had this little line running down the pipe here. You got some little bits of toilet paper scraps in there. That would appear to be a hairline crack. As far as I can tell, that's what it appears to be. What I'm not seeing here is much in the way of moisture intrusion evidence. Usually when you've got old concrete pipe, because it's somewhat porous, when moisture intrudes through a particular area of concrete on a consistent basis, you get a very obvious dark stain to the concrete, and I'm not seeing that there. And so, again, nonetheless, you have a little bit of a crack there. That spot, for instance, is about 7 feet deep. It's under a great deal of weight and pressure, which keeps things held together. So at one point in time, we used to hammer down a little bit more on stuff like that, hairline cracks. You know, mostly because it was at a point in time where we just hadn't scoped as many lines to figure this stuff out. As time has gone on here, in fact, you may have a little bit of a crack here that runs back. That might also be the water line. Concrete is porous to an extent, and it does absorb water. That might just be where the water line's sitting. Anyway, the things that I look for mainly now at this point in time, you know, whether you've got pipe joints that are starting to show a level of being compromised, where the grout's starting to wear out, moisture starting to seep through. For instance, that kind of dark staining on the sidewall there is some of the stuff I try to look for. Although on the sidewall like that, it's not necessarily meaningful. It's hard to tell if there's even much in the way of a crack there at all. Just visually, it's hard to see it. What I'm looking for most importantly is whether it's showing any obvious signs of settling. And this is what I was looking for last time on the last video. That right there is the transition to 4-inch pipe, right there. And the reason I was trying to hunt that down, if you're here long enough to see that pipe require updating, it's at this point right here. If you want to do a trenchless epoxy liner, you'll probably have to dig down right here. It's about 4 feet deep. It's in the dirt or the grass right before the grass hits the gravel. You'd have to add in a 4-inch access point, and then you could do an epoxy liner and avoid even messing with cutting the road open. And that's looking down the road a ways. The reason I'm not recommending any fixes on that as it sits right now is right now it's a visual blemish. I don't see any strong evidence that it's hardly letting anything in the way of groundwater seep through there. There's also zero settling. That piece of concrete pipe has stayed put very nicely. It's got super good slope and grade to it. Everything flows through it beautifully. What I would do is periodically, but maybe every 2 years or so, is rescope the line and keep an eye on it. Most likely what will wear out before that little tiny crack even turns into something is usually the pipe joints will start wearing out. Those are grouted shut. The grout is often what slowly but surely over time starts to get worn out. But if you see any signs of hydro erosion, that's my main concern, is if something is allowing groundwater to seep through in a manner that it's also allowing dirt to come through, which can hydro erode the support out from underneath the line. If I start seeing evidence that the line is settling, that's where I get a little bit more concerned about things, to where it starts to become a progressive situation. And if you do at some point down the road start seeing signs of that, that's at that point you want to start considering looking into the prospect of an epoxy liner. It's a nice way of doing things where you can fix stuff almost entirely without digging. If this clean out over here were 4-inch diameter, you'd be able to do the entire update without any digging whatsoever. Unfortunately, this thing remains 3-inch until you get out near the right-of-way area. So anyway, I'm not trying to freak you out talking about that like it's all of a sudden going to go to pot on you tomorrow. This is looking into the future, and I like to give people an idea as to what they're looking at down the road if they live at a house for long enough. As we sit here today, the concrete pipe is clean, it drains very nicely, and the pipe joints are intact. That's usually the first thing that starts to wear out on concrete, long before any little hairline cracks or anything like that start to form. Anyway, and all the ABS pipe here is in good shape, has very good flow. The sewer line is functioning properly at this time. I would just recommend a rescope at every 2 years to keep an eye on things. That way you can pick and choose the right time to do an update down the road. What you don't want to do is let a line wear out. And this is looking way down the road as it sits right now, relative to how this line is aged. If you let a line wear out to the point where it starts settling, and this one will not do it as aggressively as your average line because of that steep angle it has to it. But if you let a line get to the point where you've got bellies forming, offset joints, things like that, some of that stuff will prevent you from being able to do a liner, and you're digging it up the good old-fashioned way. This one, because of that hard angle, I've been doing this for 13 years and cambered about 24 or 5,000 sewer lines. When lines have a steep pitch to them like that, they, generally speaking, stay in position much nicer than a line that's run flatter because of the sheer angle they're sitting at. They just are not as susceptible to settling issues. I've seen a lot of lines that are, I mean, we're talking 100-year-old lines that are just gaping wide open, huge holes, and the things still have perfect slope and grade to them. Where you take that same line and run it flatter, and it will settle like crazy. So this is not one I'm worried about all of a sudden running from you and settling in just a matter of a couple years. Most likely we're looking down the road a long ways. So anyway, sewer line is functioning properly at this time. Very nice looking sewer line there, and it is very clean.